Prologue. 3 years after my death, my husband threw the divorce papers at the android that had been living my life. He did it just to see a flicker of jealousy or rage on her face. He wanted to see me break. But he was destined for disappointment. 3 years ago, I traded my soul to the system to cure his terminal cancer. The woman staying by his side was just a machine, a tool without a single drop of emotion. It wasn't until his wedding day to another woman that the truth came out. His childhood sweetheart pushed me into traffic, and as the tires crushed me into scrap metal, he finally realized something. I wasn't human anymore. When Silas Hayes tossed my ring into the water, I didn't hesitate to jump in after it. It was the middle of winter, and a thin layer of ice had formed over the surface of the pool. The water was bone-chillingly cold. It took me nearly half an hour to find that plain, ordinary silver band. It was a gift Silas had given me years ago, back when we had nothing. As I tried to climb out, I realized my joints were locking up. My body refused to move. "Silas, I don't know what's wrong with Sienna. She just jumped in the moment she saw me," Kendra Sinclair said, her voice trembling with fake concern. "Do you think she's trying to frame me for something?" She walked over to Silas, her brow furrowed in a practiced pout. Silas didn't even flinch. He just wrapped his designer fur coat tighter around himself, his eyes full of scorn. "Sienna Xavier, what kind of pathetic stunt is this? Are you trying to play the victim now?" The temperature was below freezing. Silas watched me standing there, soaked to the bone and shivering, without a hint of worry. "Get out of the water. Or are you waiting for me to come down and carry you?" He scoffed, his face twisted with pure annoyance. Kendra sighed, pretending to care. "Sienna, please get out. It's freezing. You're going to make Silas worry." I tried to speak, but the water had caused a short circuit in my vocal processor. All I could do was move my lips silently. My left leg had hit the edge of the pool during the jump, tearing the synthetic skin, and revealing the silver titanium frame beneath. Silas didn't notice. His patience finally snapped. He crossed his arms and looked at me with cold indifference. "If you love that water so much, stay there for the rest of your life." I watched from within the machine as he walked away. The android remained motionless, staring at his retreating back. He didn't look back, not even once. No normal human could stay in icy water for that long without a reaction. Silas either didn't notice the abnormality, or he simply didn't care because his eyes were only for Kendra. I suspect that even if I had frozen to death right there, he would have cheered. I had forgotten that I was the person he hated most in this world. But the real me was already gone. The thing standing next to Silas was just a heartless robot. I was a transmigrator. My mission in this world had been to save Silas Hayes. I arrived when I was only 13. The first time I saw him, he was huddling in a corner of a miserable orphanage, counting ants. Life there was brutal and lean. There was never enough to eat. At 10 years old, Silas was so malnourished he looked like a scrawny 7-year-old. I followed the cliché script. I gave him everything, worked every job I could find, and paid for his education. We survived the hardest years of our lives together. It took a long time to earn his trust. A person who has never known love doesn't give their heart away easily. I understood his fears. I cooked for him, worked double shifts, and shielded him from the world. Once, Silas was bullied by his classmates for being an orphan. I tracked them down and fought every single one of them to stand up for him. Their parents made my life hell afterward. But I didn't care. Every time someone laid a finger on Silas, I found a way to make them pay. Back then, I went to school every day with a face covered in bruises. That was when Silas gave me his first genuine smile. He asked me who I really was. Following the system's instructions, I told him I was the child of his parents' old friends. I told him our parents had died in the same accident, and that his mother had never stopped looking for him. Silas believed me. After that, life became peaceful. We grew up side by side. We were childhood sweethearts, though Silas eventually fell into a passionate, whirlwind romance with Kendra in college. But in the end, I was the one who stayed. My mission was technically complete the year we got married. However, during the process of saving him, I had fallen hopelessly in love with that resilient boy. I chose to stay in this world for him. But 3 years ago, I traded my soul to the system to save him from terminal cancer. Now, the Sienna Xavier by his side was nothing more than a hollow shell. The android looked exactly like me. It had all my memories and a single primary command: love Silas Hayes forever. The system told me that once Silas divorced me and married Kendra, it would take my soul away for good. Now that Kendra was back, I knew my time was running out. The system asked me if I regretted my choice to stay. I looked down. My heart, which had stopped beating long ago, still felt like it wanted to ache. I couldn't say I regretted it, but I couldn't say I didn't. The old Sienna, full of passion, would have insisted Silas would never betray her. But the current me could only smile bitterly and admit that I was full of regret. Both versions were me. I had loved, and I had learned. Kendra returned on our 6th wedding anniversary. Predictably, Silas didn't show up that night. Even though I was technically dead, it still hurt. Then I forced myself to be rational. Silas wasn't even there when I died. Why would he care about an anniversary? The memory of the pain from my final days flooded back. 3 years ago, when Silas was diagnosed, I made the deal. I transferred his cancer cells into my own body. He got healthier and more vibrant every day. I withered away in weeks. On the day I died, I called him and begged him to come home. He just sighed with irritation. Sienna, stop being so dramatic. I'm busy and I don't have time for your games. Through the system's eyes, I saw him wrapped in Kendra's arms. They were sharing a desperate, lingering kiss. Kendra was leaving the country, and he couldn't stand to let her go. I sighed, a single tear escaping my eye. I told the system to take me right then. Pull my soul out. The moment I left my body, the android was activated. My physical remains dissolved into nothingness within seconds. For 3 whole years, Silas never realized his wife was a fake. His affair with Kendra, however, was common knowledge. Everyone knew the rising tech mogul had a trophy wife who had blackmailed him into marriage. Everyone knew his true love was the Sinclair heiress. Now that she was back, people were taking bets on how long it would take for me to be kicked to the curb. Back in the present, the android finally regained enough function to crawl out of the pool. Inside the house, Silas and Kendra were sipping hot tea and laughing together. Kendra reached out and playfully ruffled his hair. Silas looked down, blushing slightly. He had a look of tenderness I hadn't seen in years. They looked like a perfect, harmonious couple. The android stood at the door, water dripping onto the hardwood floor. It tried to step forward, but its leg glitched again. Kendra was the first to notice. She smirked. Sienna, why are you just standing there? The moment Silas heard my name, his face turned to stone. He looked at me with cold eyes. So you finally decided to crawl back in. He noticed the water soaking through my clothes and frowned. Sienna, Kendra has a bit of a cough. Go get her some medicine. Kendra stopped him, covering her mouth with a delicate, fake cough. Forget it, Silas. Sienna will get angry. Let her change first so she doesn't get sick. She was playing the part of the saint perfectly. Silas shook his head. No, Kendra. Your health is more important than her temper. He glared at me. Did you hear me? Go find the medicine for Kendra. Now. The android's internal systems finished a minor repair. It looked at Silas and forced a smile. Of course, Silas. I'll go right away. The android found the cold medicine and prepared a warm cup for Kendra. But just as it handed the cup to her, Kendra let go. The glass shattered on the floor. The scalding liquid splashed all over the android's legs. Oh, Kendra cried out. Before anyone could react, Kendra stood up, clutching her hand and looking like she was in agony. From my perspective, I could see that the water hadn't even touched her. Kendra. Silas rushed over, his face pale with worry. He took her hand gently, then looked up at the android with pure rage. Sienna, are you really this useless? You can't even hold a cup? The android blinked, confused. The heat from the water had caused a major system crash. Its memory chips were scrambling. Its limbs began to twitch uncontrollably. Perhaps there was a trace of my old resentment left in the programming, because the android suddenly looked Kendra in the eye. You're making a scene over a few drops of water? Stop faking. You're being pathetic. This is my house. If you don't like it, go back to your own. The android spoke in a flat, robotic monotone. Kendra's face went pale with shock. Strangely, a flash of something like excitement or hope crossed Silas's eyes. For once, he didn't scream at me. He just led Kendra downstairs to put some ointment on her non-existent burn. The android dragged its stiff body to the bedroom to initiate a self-repair cycle. Just as the cycle was finishing, Silas pushed the door open. Seeing the android with its eyes closed, he reached out and touched its forehead. He was holding a bowl of dark, bitter herbal soup. Sienna, you shouldn't have talked to Kendra like that. She's a Sinclair. He held the bowl out. It was freezing today. You shouldn't have jumped into that pool out of spite. The android shook its head. I am fine. I do not need medicine. Silas took this for a pouty tantrum. He actually chuckled. You're still the same. Still terrified of bitter medicine. There was a time when Silas and I were so poor we couldn't afford a doctor. One winter, I got so sick I couldn't breathe. Silas tried to spend his meager savings on medicine, but I stopped him. I had looked him in the eye and lied. I'm not being cheap. I'm just scared of the taste. It's a waste of money because I'll just throw it up. I just need to sleep it off. But Silas was rich and powerful now. Why would he remember those days? To end the conversation, the android tilted its head. Where is Kendra? Aren't you going to take care of her? I will go down and apologize to her soon. Is that okay, Silas? The android's programming had reset. Its core directive was to make Silas happy. Since Silas loved Kendra, the android concluded it must treat Kendra with kindness to please him. Silas's face darkened instantly. Don't you even care? I'm here with you while she's hurt downstairs. The android was genuinely baffled. I am not jealous, Silas. Whatever makes you happy, I will support. Kendra is the woman you love. I will apologize and be good to her. It was a perfect response, yet Silas looked like he wanted to kill someone. Sienna Xavier, how long are you going to keep up this act? Silas stared at the android, his eyes searching its face for a single crack in its composure. He wanted to see a tremor in its hands, a flare of anger, a tear. Anything that proved Sienna was still inside there, fighting for him. Instead, the android simply stood there. Its eyes were clear, dark, and utterly flat. I am not acting, Silas, the android said, its synthetic vocal cords producing a tone so smooth and even it sounded like a recorded public announcement. If my presence causes you and Miss Sinclair discomfort, I can sign the dissolution papers at your earliest convenience. Silas's chest heaved. He slammed the bowl of herbal medicine onto the nightstand, sending dark liquid sloshing over the polished wood. You think you can play hard to get now? He sneered, though his voice sounded thin, lacking its usual cruelty. You think if you act detached, I'll come crawling back? You spent 10 years suffocating me, Sienna. You forced me into this marriage. I understand, the android replied. The system, I mean my choices in the past, were misguided. I apologize for burdening you. Silas took a step back, his teeth grinding together so hard his jaw ached. He pulled a thick folder from his inner coat pocket and slammed it onto the mattress. The white cover bore bold black letters. Agreement for dissolution of marriage. Sign it, Silas spat, glaring at her. Since you're so generous, sign it right now. Kendra and I are getting married next month. I don't want you occupying the title of Mrs. Hayes for another day. The android didn't hesitate. It walked over to the desk, picked up a black fountain pen, and turned to the final page. Without reading a single clause, without checking the division of assets, it signed Sienna Xavier in sharp, precise cursive. It took less than 5 seconds. Silas stood frozen beside the bed, staring at the wet black ink on the paper. In his mind, he had rehearsed this scene 100 times. He thought she would weep. He thought she would throw a glass, remind him of the years she raised him in the orphanage, or beg him to remember their vows. He had prepared cold, cutting remarks to crush her pride. Instead, she handed the folder back to him with both hands, bowing her head slightly. It is done, Silas. Is there anything else you require for the wedding preparations? Silas snatched the folder, his fingers trembling so hard the paper crumpled in his grip. Get out, he whispered, his face pale with a strange, suffocating rage. Get out of my sight. The android turned and walked out of the room, its footsteps perfectly silent. High above, in the quiet void of the system, my soul watched him. I felt no satisfaction, no victory, only a profound, hollow exhaustion. System, I thought silently. How much longer until my soul is completely unbound? The mechanical voice chimed in my mind. Host, the target must complete his marriage ceremony with Kendra Sinclair. Upon the exchange of their vows, your soul will be permanently erased from this world. Current progress. 85%. Good, I thought. Let it be fast. Over the next 3 weeks, the Hayes Manor became a flurry of activity. Kendra moved in officially, bringing dozens of trunks filled with designer gowns, jewelry, and imported flower arrangements. Silas threw himself into the wedding planning, booking the city's grandest cathedral and hiring international news outlets to cover the event. He wanted the world to know he was marrying his true love. And throughout it all, the android served them. Because Silas had ordered it to stay until the wedding is over to see how a real marriage looks. The android carried out every command without complaint. It carried Kendra's heavy luggage up the stairs. It arranged the white roses Kendra preferred. It cleaned the floors where Kendra deliberately spilled wine. Kendra, however, grew increasingly unnerved. One afternoon in the living room, Kendra watched as the android carried a heavy marble vase across the room. The android's sleeve slid up, revealing its wrist. Kendra's eyes widened. Where the skin had torn during the pool incident, there was no scab. There was no fresh pink flesh. Instead, beneath a thin peeling layer of translucent silicone, a gleaming strip of silver titanium was visible, holding the wrist joint together. Kendra gasped, dropping her teacup. Silas, look at her wrist. Silas, who was reviewing the guest list on his tablet, glanced up with an annoyed sigh. Kendra, what is it now? Look at her arm. Kendra pointed a trembling finger at the android. She has something under her skin. It looks like metal. Silas walked over, his brows furrowed. He grabbed the android's wrist roughly, pulling up the sleeve to inspect it. The android stood perfectly still, its thermal regulators working overtime to maintain a steady 36.5 degrees Celsius, though the internal cooling fan gave off a faint, high-frequency hum. Silas looked at the wrist. The synthetic skin had auto-repaired slightly, pulling over the frame, though it looked pale and waxy, like a cheap mannequin. It's an orthopedic brace, Silas said flatly, dropping her arm. He looked at the android with cold disgust. She probably got it when she was throwing her tantrums 3 years ago. Sienna, stop walking around with your sleeves rolled up. You look repulsive. Understood, Silas, the android replied smoothly. Kendra swallowed hard, clutching Silas's arm. Silas, she doesn't sleep. I woke up at 2 in the morning yesterday to get water, and she was standing in the corner of the dark hallway. She didn't blink for 10 minutes. She didn't even breathe. Silas's face darkened. He glared at the android. She's doing it on purpose to scare you, he said, though a cold prickle of unease touched his own neck. She's psychological unstable. She's been like this ever since she had that fake illness 3 years ago. He stepped closer to the android, his eyes narrowing. He reached out and pressed his thumb against her cheek. It was smooth. Too smooth. There were no pores, no tiny facial hairs, no natural warmth radiating from the flesh. It felt like touching a polished candle. Sienna, Silas murmured, his voice dropping into a harsh whisper. What kind of game are you playing? Why are your hands always freezing? Why haven't I seen you eat a single meal in 3 weeks? The android blinked. A calculated, programmed action performed once every 6 seconds. I have been eating in my room, Silas. As for my temperature, the doctor said my circulation has been poor since my surgery 3 years ago. At the mention of 3 years ago, Silas flinched. That was the year he was diagnosed with terminal, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors had given him 2 months to live. He remembered the blinding pain, the vomiting of blood, the icy terror of dying in a hospital bed while his empire was just beginning to grow. And then, overnight, a miracle occurred. His tumors shrank. His blood work normalized. Within a week, the doctors declared him completely cured, calling it a medical impossibility. During those same weeks, Sienna had locked herself in the secondary villa, refusing to let him see her. When she finally came out, she was cold, distant, and silent. He had assumed she was angry that he hadn't thanked her enough, or that she was playing hard to get because he had called Kendra's name while he was delirious with fever. He had hated her for that distance ever since. Don't bring up 3 years ago, Silas spat, shoving her back a step. You didn't do anything. The doctors said it was an autoimmune remission. You just used my recovery as an excuse to act like a martyr. I know, Silas, the android said. You owe me nothing. Silas turned his back on her, his breathing ragged. He grabbed Kendra's hand. Come on, Kendra. We have our final suit fitting. Don't let this woman ruin your mood. As they walked toward the door, the android stood in the center of the grand foyer, its dark eyes following them until the heavy oak doors clicked shut. 2 days before the wedding, Silas sat in his private office at the Hayes Group headquarters, holding a fountain pen, but he hadn't written a single word in an hour. His mind was a chaotic storm. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sienna's face. Not the passionate, fiery Sienna who used to punch bullies and cook hot soup in a freezing basement, but the waxy, silent creature that sat in his house. Why hadn't she cried? Why hadn't she demanded half his fortune? Why did her skin feel like cold candle wax? His desk phone rang, shattering the silence. It was his personal physician, Dr. Vance. Silas, Dr. Vance's voice sounded strange, heavy with confusion. I was archiving our legacy medical files today to prepare for your pre-wedding insurance clearance, and I found something highly irregular. Silas adjusted his tie. What is it, doctor? Is there an issue with my blood work? No, your health is immaculate, Dr. Vance replied. It's about your records. From 3 years ago. The late-stage cancer files. Silas frowned. What about them? I had a spontaneous remission. That's what we wrote in the public press releases, Dr. Vance whispered, his voice trembling slightly over the line. But I just found a secondary lab report, tucked into the physical vault. It was signed by a private research facility that was closed down 2 years ago. Silas stood up from his chair. What does it say? Silas, late-stage pancreatic cancer cells do not vanish. They cannot be destroyed by autoimmune spikes, Dr. Vance said, his tone dead serious. According to these organ transfer logs, on the night of November 14, 3 years ago, a full-body biocellular extraction was performed in that private lab. Silas's hand tightened around the phone until the plastic groaned. A what? A biotransfer, Dr. Vance said. Someone took your necrotic tissue, your cancerous blood, and your organ failure, and transferred it into another living host using an experimental protocol. That is why you recovered in 48 hours. Silas felt the air leave his lungs. His knees hit the edge of his mahogany desk. Who? Silas's voice was barely an audible rasp. Who was the host? There was a long, excruciating pause on the other end of the line. Paper rustled. The patient's name was Sienna Xavier, Dr. Vance said quietly. Silas. According to these death records, her physical body suffered complete multi-organ collapse 48 hours later. Her cellular structure dissolved. Completely. She died 3 years ago. The phone slipped from Silas's hand, crashing onto the marble floor. She died 3 years ago. Her physical body suffered complete multi-organ collapse. She died 3 years ago. The words echoed inside his skull like thunder, tearing through his brain, shattering every piece of reality he had built over the last 3 years. No, Silas choked out, clutching his throat. No, no, no. That's impossible. She's at home. She signed the divorce papers 3 weeks ago. She's been making tea for Kendra. I touched her cheek. He stumbled over his chair, practically falling down the hallway toward the private elevator. He drove his car like a madman through the city, running red lights, forcing oncoming traffic onto the sidewalks. The tires shrieked as he pulled into the driveway of Hayes Manor. He threw the front door open. Sienna! Silas screamed, his voice raw, ragged, carrying a terrifying note of pure, unadulterated panic. Sienna, get down here. The grand foyer was quiet. Kendra was standing near the grand staircase, wearing a stunning, pearl-encrusted lace wedding dress. Her hair was styled in soft waves, a diamond tiara resting on her head. When she saw Silas rush in, pale as a corpse and soaked in cold sweat, her smile faltered. Silas? What's wrong? Why are you screaming? Kendra asked, taking a step down the stairs. The seamstress just finished the veil. Look, doesn't it? Where is she? Silas roared, lunging up the stairs and grabbing Kendra by her shoulders, his bloodshot eyes wild with terror. Where is Sienna? Kendra winced in pain, her face twisting in anger. Silas, you're hurting me. She's upstairs in the laundry room. Why do you care where she is? We're getting married in 2 days. Silas shoved her aside and sprinted up the second-floor hallway. He threw open the door to the small storage room near the back balcony. The android was standing by an iron board, pressing a set of white napkins for the wedding banquet. Hearing the door crash open, the android turned its head slowly. Its waxy pale face met Silas's bloodshot gaze. Silas, the android said, its voice smooth and flat. Is there an emergency? The banquet napkins will be finished in 10 minutes. Silas took 3 slow, agonizing steps toward it. His hands were shaking so violently he couldn't form a fist. He reached out, his thumb pressing against the android's neck, searching for a pulse. There was no thumping vein. There was no warm rhythm of blood. There was only the faint, microscopic vibration of an internal cooling fan humming at 4,000 revolutions per minute. Sienna. Silas wept, tears suddenly bursting from his eyes, pouring down his pale cheeks. Sienna, look at me. Tell me who you are. Tell me what you did 3 years ago. The android blinked. 1, 2, 3 seconds. My name is Sienna Xavier, the android replied, reciting its core hard-coded identity script. I am your wife. My primary objective is to love Silas Hayes. Forever. Silas let out a choked, horrific sob. He grabbed her shoulders, pulling her against his chest, holding her with all the desperate strength in his body. Where is your blood? Silas screamed into her shoulder, his tears soaking the collar of her gray dress. Why are you so cold? Where did you go 3 years ago? The android did not hug him back. Its arms remained limp at its sides. I am right here, Silas. The synthetic voice said, devoid of warmth, devoid of grief, devoid of soul. I have always been here. Behind them, standing in the doorway of the storage room, Kendra watched the scene unfold. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and jealousy. She looked at the way Silas was weeping over this woman, clutching her as if his world were ending. Then Kendra's eyes landed on the android's neck where Silas's hands had pulled back the collar. A small tear in the synthetic skin near the collarbone had opened up. Through the gap, a circuit board with a blinking red LED light was pulsing softly. Beneath a layer of clear resin, Kendra's blood ran cold. It's not human, Kendra realized, a wave of horrific understanding washing over her. It's a machine. Sienna is dead, and this thing is a machine. If Silas realized that Sienna had died to save him, he would never marry Kendra. He would spend the rest of his life mourning a ghost. Kendra's eyes turned dark, filled with a sudden, vicious resolve. The day of the grand wedding arrived. The sky above the city was draped in heavy, dark rain clouds. Thunder rumbled in the distance as hundreds of luxury vehicles pulled up to the St. Jude Cathedral. Downtown, the media was out in full force. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks as high society guests, corporate executives, and celebrities flooded through the massive arched doors of the church. Inside the private bride's dressing room, Kendra stood before a full-length mirror. She wore her $1,000,000 gown, but her face was grim. She turned to the android who was standing quietly in the corner, holding a tray with a glass of water and Kendra's touch-up makeup kit. You, Kendra whispered, stepping close to the machine. The android raised its eyes. Yes, Miss Sinclair? Silas went to the hospital again last night, didn't he? Kendra hissed, her voice dripping with venom. He spent 3 hours in the archives searching for medical files. He knows she died 3 years ago. The android remained silent. Its internal sensors detected a high stress level in Kendra, but its programming forbade it from taking defensive action against humans. You're a monster, Kendra spat, reaching out and grabbing the android's jaw. The synthetic skin stretched unnaturally under her manicured nails. You're a disgusting tin puppet. Once Silas marries me today, I'm going to have you melted into scrap metal. My contract ends upon the completion of the marriage ceremony, the android noted calmly. I will no longer occupy space in this household after today. No, Kendra sneered, a wicked grin spreading across her red lips. You won't even make it to the end of the ceremony. I'm not going to let Silas look at you for one more second. Kendra grabbed the android's arm and yanked it out the side door of the dressing room, leading toward the rear courtyard of the cathedral. The courtyard faced a busy, 6-lane avenue where heavy cargo trucks sped through the rain. The rain was pouring down, soaking Kendra's veil and wetting the android's gray dress. Look at yourself. Kendra screamed over the sound of the thunder and roaring traffic. You're not Sienna. You're nothing. Why won't you just disappear? She dragged the android toward the edge of the curb, right near the white pedestrian lines. At that exact moment, the rear doors of the cathedral swung open. Silas walked out, wearing his dark groom's tuxedo. He had been looking for Sienna everywhere. He hadn't slept for 48 hours. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw stubbled, looking like a man on the brink of madness. When he saw the two figures standing in the rain near the street, his heart leaped into his throat. Sienna! Silas screamed, running into the courtyard, ignoring the rain. Kendra heard his voice. She looked back, seeing Silas running toward them, his eyes locked entirely on the android. Panic and rage seized Kendra's heart. If he reaches her, he'll take her away, Kendra thought. He'll never look at me again. D. Kendra shrieked, throwing her full weight forward and shoving the android violently into the middle of the 6-lane avenue. The android's internal gyro stabilizers glitched under the sudden, asymmetric force. Its left knee joint locked. It stumbled backward, stepping directly into the path of a 60-ton container truck flying down the wet asphalt at 60 miles per hour. Blare. The truck's air horn shattered the stormy air. New. Silas's scream tore through the rain, a sound of absolute, apocalyptic agony. Crash. The impact was catastrophic. The massive steel bumper of the truck struck the android square in the chest. There was no spray of crimson blood. There was no sound of fracturing human bone. Instead, a deafening explosion of sharp, metallic shrieks echoed across the avenue. The synthetic skin ripped apart like paper. Under the crushing force of 60 tons of steel, the inner structure shattered into thousands of gleaming pieces. Titanium ribs, copper wiring, silicone sheets, glass lenses, and streams of bright, glowing blue synthetic hydraulic fluid splashed across the wet asphalt. The truck slammed on its brakes, its massive tires grinding the crushed metallic frame across 30 feet of pavement before coming to a complete stop. The avenue went dead silent, save for the patter of rain and the hum of idling engines. Silas fell onto his knees in the middle of the street. The rain poured down onto his hair, his face, his tuxedo, but he didn't feel the cold. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. He stared at the crash site. There was no blood. Lying in the center of a puddle of blue liquid and shattered glass was a crushed titanium skull. The artificial eye lenses were cracked, flickering with a faint, dying red light. And resting beside the crushed mechanical hand, pinned beneath a bent steel finger, was the plain, tarnished silver band he had given her 10 years ago in the orphanage. Silas crawled forward on his hands and knees. He didn't care about the honking cars. He didn't care about the horrified screams of the wedding guests pouring out of the church. He didn't care about Kendra, who was standing on the sidewalk, pale as a sheet, trembling in her ruined wedding dress. He reached the pile of crushed metal. With trembling, bleeding fingers, Silas picked up the shattered titanium head and the plain silver ring. The artificial eye flickering with red light suddenly focused on his face. A tiny, damaged speaker located near the jaw mechanism crackled to life, emitting a static-laced, synthesized voice. P primary, objective complete. Silas Hayes is cured. Silas Hayes is happy. Executing, final command. Farewell. Silas. Spark. A tiny cloud of gray smoke rose from the central processing chip inside the titanium skull. The red light in the eye lenses died out completely. The machine went dark. The final hum of the cooling fan ceased. Silas sat in the middle of the rain-slicked avenue, clutching the cold metal skull and the silver ring to his chest, let out a sound that didn't sound like a human being. It was a howl of pure, unadulterated, eternal agony. Sienna. He bowed his head against the sharp titanium edges, weeping until he was coughing up fresh blood. soaking the crushed gears with his tears. She had died 3 years ago to give him his life. She had left a machine behind to keep him company, to make sure he wasn't lonely, to carry out her love even from beyond the grave. And he had spent those 3 years hating her, mocking her, throwing her into freezing pools, and throwing her away for another woman. He hadn't been betrayed. He had murdered the only soul that had ever loved him. Behind him, Kendra took a cautious step forward into the rain. Silas. Silas. Please. It was just a machine. It wasn't real. Come inside the wedding. Silas turned his head slowly. His eyes were completely bloodshot, filled with a murderous, terrifying hatred. That made Kendra's heart stop beating. Get away from me, Silas whispered, his voice cold as the grave. If you take another step toward me, I will kill you with my bare hands. He stood up, holding the crushed pieces of the machine in his coat, and walked away down the middle of the empty street, leaving the wedding, the guests, and his empire behind. 3 months later, the Hayes Group, once a rising tech titan, had completely collapsed. Silas had resigned from all corporate positions, liquidated his shares, and cut off all business ties with the Sinclair family. Within 6 weeks, the Sinclair Group went bankrupt due to the sudden loss of capital, and Kendra's father was arrested for corporate tax fraud. Kendra herself was shunned by high society, living in a small, dingy apartment on the outskirts of the city, her dreams of being Mrs. Hayes permanently destroyed. Meanwhile, in a quiet, isolated villa atop a misty mountain overlooking the ocean, the house was completely dark. Silas sat in the center of a large, sterile white room. Around him were hundreds of glass cases containing every piece of crushed metal, wire, and silicone recovered from the crash site. In the center of the room sat a large, custom-built glass pedestal. On the pedestal lay the plain silver ring. Silas was 30 years old, but he looked 50. His hair was streaked with gray, his body emaciated, his eyes sunken and hollow. He wore a simple, cheap cotton shirt, the kind Sienna used to buy for him when they were teenagers in the orphanage. Every day, he sat in front of the pedestal, holding a small tape recorder, playing the final static-laced message on a continuous loop. Silas Hayes is cured. Silas Hayes is happy. Farewell, Silas. I'm not happy, Sienna, Silas whispered into the dark, cold room, tears silently dripping onto his hands. I'm not happy. Please come back. I'll take the medicine. I'll jump in the pool. Please. There was no answer. Only the cold wind howling against the window panes. Far away, beyond the clouds, beyond the realm of physical matter, in a vast, brilliant expanse of golden light, my soul floated peacefully in the quiet void. The system's mechanical voice chimed one last time, sounding gentle and warm. Host, the target's remorse level has reached 100%. All world ties have been completely severed. You are now free to enter your new life. Do you wish to look back one last time? I looked down through the clouds at the dark, cold villa on the mountain, at the broken man weeping over a pile of scrap metal and a cheap silver ring. I looked at his tears, his gray hair, his eternal torment. 3 years ago, seeing him in pain would have torn my heart to pieces. Now I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, no pity, no love. He was just a stranger who had shared a short, distant chapter of my past. I turned my back on the mortal world, facing the brilliant golden light ahead. No, I smiled softly, my voice light as a feather. There is nothing left to seek. My soul turned, stepping forward into the warm, endless light, leaving the cold machine and the broken boy behind forever.